After Ricky's announcement with DD, it looked like things were going super well. It was going to be like that next era for Dynamic, but it seems like things are flatlining with so many players leaving. Let's go into what is really going on and figure out the numbers behind Dynamic and if they do have a good future or a bleak one. And a little disclaimer is that I'm from Kansas. I've had countless events sponsored by Dynamic, so if there's any player that has a remote sense of bias, it would be me. But ultimately, I can't say I have a strong favoring for Dynamic. I don't really favor them in any particular disc. I generally like to put with Wardens and Judges, but other than that, I would say I have no true affiliation with any Dynamic discs. Alright, so to break down who all is leaving, first we have Chris Clemens. Obviously, Clemonade was doing something a little bit interesting, changing his name from DD Clemonade to DG Clemonade. Obviously, we knew he was probably going to leave. He did eventually leave and joined Discraft, and obviously this is going to be a decent blow for Dynamic, but all in all, if this was the only player he lost, it wouldn't be the worst because he really hasn't had the best of seasons recently, so his true value to the company may have not been that big, but this is just one in a line of many. Next up, and probably a much more tragic turn of events, we have Gavin Rathbun, who, if we recall just a couple years ago, was getting top 10, top 5 finishes week after week. It was looking like he would be a top contender, but after a terrible shoulder injury, he had to have a lot of recovery. He still isn't back to fully recovered, and it seems like he still doesn't know his future in disc golf. He actually just posted, "Thank you DD for the past 2 years of support. I'm not sure any plans for the 2024 season. I know I'm not done with disc golf quite yet, but I know if worse comes to worse, I have a whole year to get my body and mind on the same path." So while I don't necessarily fully understand what that means, it does sound like he's going to be gone for the year and potentially might pull a Heather Young and just drop out of the sport entirely. It is hard to say. I just don't foresee him leaving disc golf altogether because he truly was a top contender, and I would really hate to see him go. But as is the case with sports, injury is seemingly inevitable for some, so if you just can't ever be fully healthy, then maybe you are just not fit to be on tour. Even though that would be so tragic, it might be the case. But again, just 2 players. But then next up, somebody that means probably actually more to the company, Danny Lindahl, and in a very interesting turn of events, he's actually becoming a videographer at K-State, aka Kansas State University, my alma mater, and I definitely did not foresee this happening. And being the media producer for Dynamic and producing probably some of the best disc golf content in the entire industry, with the #1 video series being the Physics of Flight, which was basically everyone's foray into the sport, and was able to explain the basic concepts of disc golf so well. And with him leaving, it definitely sends a sour taste in everyone's mouth because he truly is probably one of the nicest people that you ever see on disc golf YouTube. But like he mentioned in his going away video, things have changed with DD. He didn't necessarily mention any bad things, but just the trends felt like he was not really fulfilling himself, so he had to move on to something else. And then going back to the players, we have Silva Saarinen, who is honestly probably one of the best FPO players in the entire industry right now, and the fact that DD lost her is definitely a big blow for the future of Dynamic because she is definitely an up-and-coming player, winning 5 Euro Tour events last year and getting 6th at Worlds. But not only that, she has one of the best distance shots in the entire game, easily throwing over 450 feet. She is going to be a contender for top 5 finishes week after week if she can continue positive trajectory, which it definitely seems like she is going that direction because she is just crushing it week after week. And only being 20 years old and already crushing, she is just destined to be a top tier player. But then we have, of course, the FPO drama with Macie Velediaz. If you are not aware, she was given a certain offer from DD that was presumably pretty small. She shopped around with other companies and then just felt like, you know what, I've been happy with DD for the past couple years. I think I will just go back and tell them I'm only going to do 10 events because I'm pregnant, at which moment they came back with a lower number, which ultimately was not even enough to sustain herself on tour, which effectively means that she is an unsigned player for the entire season of 2024. And while there are definitely a lot of opinions on whether or not this is even like okay for DD to do this, ultimately while the optics are definitely really bad, there are probably no legal ramifications of this decision. But to add on to all these people leaving, having DD effectively just not support one of their players really leaves a sour taste in everyone's mouth, and it really feels like DD is just leaving their players out to dry, which even if that's not the reality, it feels that way to the community at large, which will certainly bring in negative effects to the future of growth for Dynamic, which leads us into the question, how did we even get here? Well, if you recall, last year, obviously we had the huge Ricky contract, which was again $4 million for 4 years, along with Kona getting $500,000 for 4 years. And obviously we know that Kona has a lot of struggles with her cancer. She's had a lot of mental struggles. She's ultimately just not really been in the game much. And according to her post, she has just recently been able to be clear for putting. So if she can only putt, then I think her play for the next couple years will probably be non-existent for like the Pro Tour. But with that said, the reason why people were buying her discs was more so because they connected with her, not necessarily her amazing play. And it almost might be a point of connection to have somebody that is battling thyroid cancer, because you can certainly empathize with how difficult that battle may be. Going on to basically the face of DD, Ricky. And everyone was probably thinking, wow, this is like such an insane deal. I really hope it pays off for them, because $4 million for really any company, no matter how big you are, will certainly be a huge dent in your pocket. And it definitely seems like DD thought they could afford this no problems. But with the decline of disc golf sales, I am sure that DD is selling a lot less than they thought they would be, and I bet that their budget for player acquisition is way lower than you might think. And while this may be kind of a loose observation, it does seem like people are buying Ricky's discs less and less as compared to Simon or Paul, and they definitely prefer other people seemingly than they have ever had before. So while there's still a huge base of fans for Ricky, the number of people buying Saki Slammers has certainly declined, at least in my perspective of the entire industry. So it seems like even their top pro is probably underselling what they expected to get. And it really makes me wonder, how much can Ricky truly support the entire ecosystem for DD? Obviously they have kind of felt like the mainstay for disc golf, and it feels like they kind of have relied on their laurels for so long, and they really have not done too much to really expand the company. And this is kind of the pinnacle of that moment. It doesn't seem like you can just continue to do the same thing again and again and expect good results. You really have to pivot to see what the market is doing, and DD does not seem to be doing that. I think their marketing hasn't been that good. I think their player acquisition has been kind of abysmal, with really the only pro signed with them being Jaden Rye, who does seem to be one of like the coolest guys I've ever seen throw. He is 1,004 rated, I believe, and actually just won a tournament at Waco, with his last round being 1048 rated, and definitely feels like the new era of disc golf, with just like a lot of dancing on his social media, and it definitely seems like a fun-loving and positive vibe. But that does seem to be kind of like the anomaly for DD. It doesn't seem like that kind of presence is represented anywhere else. And to really back up those stats, I have a couple of data points. First one being the market share at Infinite. Obviously there has been a lot of brands coming up in the industry, but with that said, this still is a very staggering stat, with DD having 9% market share in 2018, going all the way down to 3.2% market share in 2023. And to me, this certainly signifies a huge downtrend in the future of DD, at least in online sales. But then for a totally different optic, we have the Ultiworld Fandom Survey, which surveyed thousands of players, and they actually rated DD a 5.6 out of 10, being one of the worst rated companies in the entire survey. And while there was a bit of an uptick for people that were from Kansas, this honestly is just not a great look for DD, and it definitely seems like the public perception is just not that positive. Now, what can we truly attribute this to? It is hard to say. It feels like they've become pretty stale. I would say the only good things they've done recently is a Supreme plastic. I think their Lucid plastic is good, but I wouldn't say it's like far and away the best. But it also feels like not only does everyone seem to dislike Dynamic, it also feels like everyone kind of hates Emporia itself. So it's almost like metaphoric for how the decline of Dynamic is equivalent to the decline of Emporia. It almost feels like the bygone era of what disc golf used to be, which makes it very hard to see good things for the future of Dynamic unless they hard pivot into a totally different company. But they are owned by a house of discs, so it does potentially seem possible that the entire company gets bought out by a different brand, maybe Latitude, even though I don't really know how that would work. But it does seem like the potential for 2024 or 2025 where it does get acquired, because it seems like there are just so many negative factors going for DD right now that I just cannot foresee positive growth for the company. So it definitely feels like it could be a situation with Jomez where they just could not afford their expenses and they have to get bought out by a larger company. Only time will tell. But with that said, what do you guys think about Dynamic? Do you think they still have great plastic? You still like to throw them? You don't really care about who's sponsored by them because you love their plastic? Or are you on the flip side where you do kind of value like who is on the team, and if it truly seems like everyone's leaving, are you less likely to buy Dynamic? I would love to know, because honestly it does feel like to me I basically never buy any DD discs because there's just so many great discs out there on the market, and DD just does not feel like it's doing anything radically new or fun or interesting. So be sure to comment down below what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching. I know this is kind of like a long, lengthy video, but there was a lot of things to break down here, and I hope that I explained it well. But with that, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Wild Runs, signing out. Peace.